The twin sons of Zephyra were setting as the palace lit up in golden colors. The great ceremony of honor was about to begin. Hundreds of guests from different corners of the galaxy had arrived. Bright flags waved in the sky and music echoed through the high towers. The people of Zephyr stood waiting for their future leader to appear inside the grand hall. Princess Elnai stood behind a curtain. She was nervous, but kept her back straight. She had waited for this day since childhood. It was the day when males of noble houses would step forward and accept her as their chosen partner, not just as a royal duty, but as a symbol of unity and strength. It was tradition that kept the empire strong for centuries, but Elnai was not like the other princesses before her. She was smaller than others of her kind. Her eyes were softer, her voice quieter. While others trained with swords and shouted commands, Elnai spent time in the garden, reading scrolls about peace, trade, and star diplomacy. Many whispered that she was too gentle to rule. Some even said she was weak. The music slowed. A voice from the front called her name. Princess Elnai of House Valine, daughter of the Empress, keeper of the Moonstone Path. She stepped forward dressed in flowing blue robes that shimmered like water. Her head was high, but her heart beat fast. She walked to the center of the hall of bonds. Rows of alien males stood in front of her dressed in armor and jewels. They came from different warrior clans, rich merchant families. And even the moon Koloni Selni raised her hand and spoke clearly. I stand before you as your future leader. Who among you will walk the path with me as my bonded mate? The room grew quiet. To quiet, Selni looked from one face to another. She saw pride, coldness, and discomfort. But not a single male stepped forward. One by one they lowered their eyes or turned away. Some looked at the floor while others whispered to each other. Minutes passed. Still no one moved. Silence grew heavy. Elnai stood alone in the center of the great hall. She felt the sting in her chest but did not show it. Her hands stayed at her sides, her shoulders straight. The Empress watched from her throne, and though her face remained calm, her eyes revealed disappointment. The back of the hall, among the guests, stood a human envoy named Tom. He wore simple clothes compared to the glittering robes around him. He had arrived just a day earlier as part of a human exploration team, sent to build peaceful relations with Zephyra. He had no rank in their system, no wealth, and no power in this world. Tom had heard about this ceremony, but did not expect what he was seeing. He watched as the proud warriors ignored the princess. He saw the quiet strength in Elnai's eyes, even when her heart was being shattered. He had seen many leaders in his travels across the stars. Some shouted orders, others ruled through fear. But this girl stood alone with grace when no one believed in her. After the ceremony ended, Elnai was taken back to her chambers. No one spoke much on the way. Behind the walls, whispers began to spread across the palace. Some said the princess was unworthy. Others said the gods had rejected her. The nobles held meetings behind closed doors. Some already discussed who would take the throne next. Later that night, Tom walked through the palace gardens. He couldn't sleep. The stars above looked different from Earth, but the sadness in Elnai's eyes still stayed with him. As he walked near the moonflower trees, he heard a soft sound. Turned the corner and saw her. Elnai sat alone by the glowing pond, her blue robes gently moving with the night breeze. She looked at the water, lost in thought. Him hesitated, but then stepped forward. Mind if I sit? He asked in a calm voice. Selni turned her head. She looked surprised but not upset. She nodded, and Tom sat beside her on the stone bench. For a while they said nothing. The pond glowed softly, and fireflies floated above the surface. Finally Tom spoke. I saw what happened today. I don't understand all your customs, but I know strength when I see it. You stood alone when no one supported you. That takes courage. Elnai smiled a little, but her eyes stayed distant. Courage without a bond means nothing in Zephyra. If no one steps forward in 3 days, I lose all rights. I will be sent to the Outer Isles in silence. Not as a princess, but as a forgotten one. Tom looked at her. That's not fair. Just because you're not like the others doesn't mean you're not worthy. Maybe they just don't see the value of kindness. But I do. Elnai turned to him. Slowly, for the first time, her eyes searched his with interest. Humans value kindness? She asked. Some of us do, Tom said with a small smile. We're still learning. But where I come from, leaders are chosen for wisdom and the heart. They carry not just the power in their voice, Ilnai seemed thoughtful. You speak different words than the warriors I've known. They only speak of power, duty, and victory. Sometimes the strongest voice is the quiet one. Tom replied. They sat together for a long time under the twin moons. The palace lights faded behind them as the stars grew brighter. Tom didn't know what he was doing. He didn't understand all the rules of this world. But something inside him knew that this girl, this small princess, who stood when others would have fallen, deserved more than rejection. She deserved a chance. And in his heart a question began to grow. What if he was the one to step forward? The next morning, sunlight touched the crystal towers of the palace. Servants walked quietly through the halls. The empress met with her advisors behind closed doors. Outside the palace gates, the city of Zephyr buzzed with questions. News of the rejected princess had already spread across the empire. People asked why no warrior had claimed her. Some blamed her size. Others blamed her soft nature. A few simply said the empire needed someone stronger. In the quiet guest quarters near the East Garden, Tom stood near the window thinking deeply. The scene from last night kept replaying in his mind. The way Ilnai looked at the water, the strength in her silence, the truth in her words. He had never met someone like her before. In his world, leadership was different. People earned respect through actions, not bloodlines. But here, ancient customs ruled everything. Tom looked down at the scroll in his hand. It explained the rules of the bonding ceremony. Only males of accepted lineages could step forward and offer a bond. But near the bottom of the scroll, one line stood out in rare times of silence. Any soul from within the empire or its allies may request the right to bond. If the council allowed, Tom's hands tightened around the scroll. It was possible. Not easy, but possible. If he stepped forward and the council allowed it, he could offer himself as Ilnai's bondmate. No one had ever heard of a human doing that, but then again, no human had ever watched a princess be rejected and felt this way before. Him walked out of his room and headed toward the main chamber. Along the way, several palace guards watched him but did not stop him. He reached the entrance of the council room and stood tall. Doors opened slowly. Inside, 12 noble elders sat around a wide table. The empress sat at the head. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were sharp. Tom stepped forward and gave a respectful bow. I am Tom of Earth, envoy of the Human Coalition. I request permission to speak under the rights of open challenge. The room went quiet. The nobles looked at each other in surprise. One of them, a tall elder named Miran, leaned forward. You may speak, human, but speak wisely. Tom took a breath. Yesterday, no male stepped forward to accept Princess Ilnai. I was present. I watched. I saw her stand with honor even when others turned away. I may not be of your kind, but I believe I understand her heart. I asked for the right to be considered as a bonding partner. The words hung in the air like stone for a few seconds. No one responded. Then a few nobles began to murmur. Some laughed quietly. One even shook his head in disbelief. A human, one said, "This is madness. He doesn't even understand our ways." Another spoke with doubt. "He is not of the bloodline. He holds no lands, no name among us." The empress raised her hand and the room became silent. She looked directly at Tom. "You know what this request means, don't you? If granted, you must face the 3 trials. These trials are not for show. They are ancient. Tests of strength, spirit, and truth. If you fail, you will be sent away in shame, and the princess will lose her final chance." Tom nodded. "I understand, but I am not here for glory. I am here because I believe Ilnai deserves someone who sees her, not just as a ruler, but as a person." The empress remained silent for a moment. Then she turned to the council. "Let the trials be prepared. If the human wishes to prove his heart, then let him face the path." The nobles whispered again. Some were angry, some were curious. One or two seemed interested, but none dared challenge the empress's decision. Word of the strange request spread quickly. By midday, crowds began to gather around the palace gates. Some came to laugh, some came in wonder. Others watched with growing interest. Could a human truly pass the ancient trials? Ilnai stood on the high balcony of her room. She had heard the news from her handmaid. At first, She thought it was a misunderstanding, but as more voices confirmed it, her heart beat faster when a human stepped forward for her. When Tom was brought to the garden court for the first trial, he found a crowd waiting. The elders stood on one side. Elnai stood quietly near the fountain, watching everything with careful eyes. The first trial was the trial of strength. A warrior drone made of living metal would challenge him. It could change shape and fight with speed and power. Tom was given only a simple staff and no armor. When the trial began, the drone struck fast. Tom dodged the first blow and rolled to the side. The next strike knocked him down, but he got up quickly. The crowd watched closely. He was smaller and slower than the drone, but he moved with thought. He didn't try to overpower it. Instead, he studied its patterns. After 10 long minutes, Tom saw an opening. He struck the drone's joint with the end of his staff and caused it to fall. The elders raised their hands in approval. He had passed the first trial. The second trial would take place at sunrise the next day. But for now, the people of Zephyra began to talk differently. They still questioned his place, but they no longer laughed. Fidelity met Tom in the garden later that evening. She looked at him carefully. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Adam looked at her with steady eyes. "Because you stood alone and didn't run. Because I believe in your kind of strength. And because I think someone has to show your people what they failed to see for the first time since the ceremony." Elnai smiled without sadness. She nodded and whispered, "Then let us see where this path leads." And under the twin moons, 2 different hearts slowly began to walk the same road. The twin suns rose slowly above the Zephyrian mountains. Morning light spilled into the palace garden as birds with crystal wings flew between the trees. The air was calm, but inside the palace hearts were tense. The second trial for the human had arrived. Some believed he would fail. Others were no longer sure. The first trial had surprised everyone. He had not won with strength, but with patience and clear thought. He stood near the fountain, where the elders waited. His arms were still sore from yesterday. The warrior drone had left bruises on his back and his side, but he stood straight and ready. He knew this trial would not test his body. It would test his spirit and his bond with Elnai. The second trial was called the Path of Heart. In this test, Tom had to enter the dream forest. It was not an ordinary forest. It was grown using ancient energy and mind crystals. Inside, nothing was real, but everything could feel real. The trial was simple in words, but not in action. He had to find one flower that matched the heartbeat of Princess Elnai. The flower grew in only one spot, hidden deep within the forest illusion. He would feel many flowers, but only one would match her spirit. Tom was given no map, only a short moment to touch Elnai's hand before entering the forest. She walked forward and looked into his eyes. Her hand touched his, and for a few seconds, time slowed. He felt a calm rhythm, soft and steady like a gentle drumbeat. It was peaceful but strong. Then the moment ended, and the gate opened. The forest was alive with colors. Trees glowed blue and green. The ground shimmered under his feet. Sounds echoed from far away, whispers and laughter, wind and music. Tom walked slowly. The trees shifted when he passed, like they were watching him. He knew the forest wanted him to fail. It would confuse his mind and test his focus. Passed by flowers that pulsed like beating hearts. He bent down near a red one. It beat fast and strong, but it did not feel right. He moved on. A gold flower beat slow and heavy, almost tired. Not the one. A blue one shimmered gently, but its rhythm felt cold. Time moved strangely inside the forest. Tom could not tell if hours passed or minutes. His body felt light, but his mind began to tire. He sat down near a quiet stream and closed his eyes. He remembered her hand in his. He remembered the sound of her voice. Not loud, but full of meaning. He focused on that rhythm and he heard it. A soft beat, not far, not near. Just Rel stood and followed the sound. He moved past twisting trees and glowing stones. He passed through a circle of light that whispered his name. Finally, near a silver hill, he saw a small white flower with petals shaped like stars. Its rhythm matched perfectly, gentle, strong, steady, like Elnatom knelt beside it. The forest shimmered once and then faded. The illusion ended. He was back in the palace garden with the flower in his hand. The crowd gasped. The elders nodded. The Empress smiled slightly. Ilnai watched him with eyes full of surprise. And something else had passed the second trial that evening. The palace was filled with whispers once more, but now they were different. Some still doubted, but many began to wonder if the human was more than just lucky. Two trials completed. One more remaining. Third trial was called the Trial of Truth. It was the hardest for many, not because it involved pain or danger, but because it demanded honesty. The challenger had to stand before the council and share their greatest fear. Not just speak it, but feel it. The truth had to come from the heart. If the council felt it was false or incomplete, the trial would be failed the next day. Tom stood before the circle of elders. The hall was silent. Even the birds outside were quiet. Ilnai stood behind the council, watching closely. The Empress gave a small nod, and Tom stepped forward and looked at each elder. Then spoke in a calm voice, "My name is Tom. I come from a world far from here. I was trained as a diplomat. I've visited many planets and met many people. But in all my travels I've carried one fear with me." He paused. His hands were still. His voice did not shake, but his words carried weight. "I fear being forgotten. Not by history or stories, but by the people I care about. I fear walking through life and never truly being seen. I fear offering my heart and being told I don't belong. I fear that even when I try my best it won't matter, that I will be left behind with nothing to show for who I really was." The room remained silent. No one moved. The elders looked at each other. Then the lead elder stood. "The truth is accepted," he said. "The human has passed the third trial." Tom stepped back quietly. His shoulders were tense, but his eyes were clear. Ilnai felt her own breath slow as she watched him. There was no pride in his face, no triumph, only calm strength. Later that day, the Empress called a private meeting. She stood with Ilnai in the garden while the wind moved through the trees. "You see something in him," the Empress said softly. Ilnai nodded. "He sees me, not as a symbol, not as a duty, but as a person." The Empress looked toward the stars. "Then he may be the one to walk beside you. If the bond is true, the fire will accept you both. We shall see tomorrow." The final ceremony was announced. The bonding flame would be lit, and the human would step forward. If the fire accepted the union, it would change color. If not, the bond would fail, and both would face exile. Across the city, people prepared to watch. In the skies above, the capital, lights began to gather. Ships from nearby colonies arrived to witness the final moment. Ilnai stood in her room that night, looking at the stars. Tom stood alone in the guest hall, holding the white flower he had found in the forest. Both were silent, but both shared the same thought. Tomorrow, everything would change. The day of the final ceremony arrived. The entire city of Zephyra was glowing with lights. Floating lanterns moved through the sky. People gathered in the high towers and streets to watch what many were calling a once-in-a-lifetime event. The bonding flame, a sacred tradition older than the empire itself, would decide the future of the royal line. In the center of the palace stood the Flame Hall, a wide circular space with white marble floors and tall golden pillars. In the middle stood a large stone basin filled with ancient fire. The flame inside it never died. It had burned for thousands of years, but it only reacted when a true bond was formed between two souls. If it turned blue, the bond was accepted. If it stayed orange, the bond was false. If the flame went out, it meant rejection. Him stood outside the flame hall in ceremonial robes. They were plain, in white with a silver symbol on the chest. He held no weapon and wore no crown. He stood as he was, a human, a guest, a believer. Ilnai stood inside the hall in front of the flame. Her dress shimmered like moonlight. Her hair was tied with threads of silver. Her eyes were calm, but her heart beat fast. She had waited her whole life for this moment, but never imagined it would be with someone from another world. The Empress stood at the far end of the hall with the council beside her. Thousands of citizens watched the ceremony from floating screens. Across the city, on other planets, people tuned in through the galactic network. They all waited to see if this human would be accepted. By the ancient Flamid, voice of the elder speaker echoed through the hall, "Let the final path begin. Let the chosen one step forward." Tom entered the hall. His footsteps were steady. His face showed no fear. He walked toward Ilnai and stopped beside her. He looked into her eyes and saw a mixture of hope and worry. She gave him a small nod and turned to face the flame. The elder speaker raised his hand. If your bond is true, the flame will speak. If it is false, the fire will turn away. Do you step forward with full heart and clear purpose? Tom nodded. I do. The speaker turned to Ilnai. Do you accept this bond without fear or force? Ilnai said. I do. The elder stepped back and the fire rose high. Its orange flames danced in the air. The moment had come. Menum reached out and gently took Ilnai's hand. Her hand was warm and soft. The fire reacted at once. It began to flicker faster. The air in the room shifted. A quiet sound like a distant song filled the hall. Fire turned pale orange, then gold. The crowd held their breath. Tom closed his eyes. Ilnai took a deep breath and the flame turned bluey, a deep bright blue that filled the hall. With light, the fire rose high into the sky and sent a wave of soft energy through the palace. The sky above the city glowed for a moment. The people gasped. The bond had been accepted. The elder speaker stepped forward and raised both hands. The flame has spoken. The bond is true. The soul of the princess has joined with the soul of the chosen. Let this be the beginning of a new era. Cheers broke out across the palace. In the city below, bells began to ring. On distant ships, crews clapped and cheered. The name of the human envoy Tom was spoken with wonder. The name of Princess Ilnai was now written in the stars. Tom turned to Ilnai. She looked at him with wide eyes. We did it, she whispered, smiled gently. No, you did it. I just walked beside you. The empress walked forward and placed her hands on their shoulders. She looked at her daughter with pride. Today you have changed not only your own path, but the path of the empire. You have shown strength through heart, not fear. This bond will be remembered. The council stepped forward and bowed to the new bonded pair. Even those who had doubted Tom now lowered their heads in respect. For in the eyes of the ancient fire, he was no longer just a visitor. He was now a part of Zephyr. Later that night, a great celebration was held in the palace gardens. Music played. Lights danced in the trees. Food from across the empire was served. Tom walked beside Ilnai through the crowd. Everywhere they went, people greeted them with respect and curiosity. Some bowed. Some asked questions. Some just smiled in silence. An elder approached Tom and said, You have done what no one expected. You reminded us that true strength is not always loud. Sometimes it walks quietly and listens before it speaks. Tom nodded. I only followed what felt right. I didn't plan this. I just knew she deserved better than silence. Ilnai smiled at his words. She had always believed in quiet strength, but no one had ever stood beside her. For it until now, as the night continued, a soft wind passed through the garden. The stars above Zephyr shone brighter than usual. The white flower Tom had found in the forest was placed in a small bowl near the center of the garden. It glowed softly in the moonlight. Tony looked at it and said, You found my spirit. Not because you were trained, but because you listened. That is something even our best warriors forget. Tom looked at her and replied, And you never gave up even when no one stood with you. That's what made me believe. You didn't need saving. You just needed someone to walk forward. They sat by the fountain as the music played on. No one disturbed them. The moment was quiet and peaceful. Two souls from different worlds now, connected by choice, not by foreseeing. The skies above, a rare light crossed the stars. It was called the Path of Unity by the people of Zephyr. It appeared only when the Empire entered a new age. Deep in the palace flames, the blue fire continued to burn steady and true. The blue flame in the palace had settled, but new storms began to rise in the hearts of many. The news of the bond between Tom and Princess Ilnai spread quickly across Zephyr and beyond. While many celebrated the new union, others whispered behind closed doors. Not everyone was happy that a human, an outsider, had become bonded with the princess. Some feared change. Some feared losing power. Among them was a noble named Varn, a man with dark eyes and sharper words. Varn had been one of the strongest supporters of the old traditions. He believed the empire should remain pure and that only a Zephyrian male could rule by the side of the princess. He had watched the ceremony with a cold smile, expecting Ilnai to fail and himself to rise. But the human success shocked him deeply. Varn's pride hurt. He could not accept the bond. In the palace halls, Varn began to spread rumors. He told the nobles that Tom had used strange tricks to win the trials. Some said the human had bribed the elders. Others said the bond was a lie and the blue flame was a mistake. Varn's words found some ears, especially among those already uneasy about the changing empire. Elnai heard of these whispers and felt a quiet storm in her heart. She knew that power often brought fear, and fear often brought lies. But she was tired of silence and shadows. She decided she would face the doubts openly. She called a meeting of the nobles, the council, and the people in the great hall. Tom stood beside Elnai as she spoke to the gathered crowd. Her voice was calm but strong. Many of you doubt the bond between me and Tom. You question if it is real or true. I tell you now, our bond was forged in trials older than any of us. It was accepted by the ancient flame, a sign that cannot be ignored. But I understand your fear. Change is difficult. The crowd listened quietly. Tom stepped forward and spoke with respect. I'm not here to take power or rule. I only ask for a chance to walk beside Elnai and help build a future for our people. The trials tested more than strength. They tested heart and truth. I have nothing to hide. Varn's eyes narrowed. He rose and shouted, words are easy. If this bond is true, then prove it. We demand a day of proving, where Tom and the princess will face a test before all. If they fail, the bond will be broken, and the empire will be saved from shame. Murmurs rose in the hall. The empress raised her hand, silencing the noise. The day of proving shall be held, she said. This will be the final test. If the bond is true, it will hold against all trials. If not, the consequences will be clear. Preparations began immediately. The day of proving was an ancient tradition, rarely used but respected. The trial chosen was the Dance of Echoes, a test of mental connection and harmony. Tom and Elnai would have to move together in perfect rhythm, their minds and bodies connected. Before the entire empire died as the day approached, tension filled the palace. Tom felt the weight of many eyes upon him. He was not a warrior or noble. He was a visitor in this strange land. Doubt crept into his heart. Was he truly worthy? Did he have the strength to prove himself again? Elnai noticed Tom's struggle. She reached out and took his hand. You are not alone, she said softly. We have already walked through fire and shadow. This is only another step. Remember who you are and why you chose to stand. Tom nodded, feeling warmth spread through him. The bond they shared was not just tradition. It was real. It was something no test could break if they trusted each other. The day of proving arrived with clear skies. The great hall was filled with thousands of spectators, warriors, nobles, and citizens gathered to watch history unfold. The air was thick with anticipation. The Dance of Echoes began. Tom and Elnai stepped into the center. The music started a slow, steady beat that filled the hall. They moved together, their steps matching perfectly. The crowd watched as their minds seemed to link. Every gesture and motion was in harmony. But Varn was not finished. He sent distractions, whispers in the crowd, sharp noises, and shifting lights meant to break their focus. Tom stumbled once, losing his balance. The crowd gasped. Elnai reached out and touched his hand. Her voice was calm but firm, focused on us. On this moment, Tom closed his eyes briefly and breathed deeply. The chaos around him faded. He felt Elnai's presence like a steady beacon. Together, they moved as one. The music rose to a crescendo. Their dance became a flawless expression of unity. As they finished, a golden light spread across the hall. The ancient spirits of Zephyra had spoken. The crowd erupted in cheers. Varn's face showed defeat, but also respect. The nobles bowed to Tom and Elnai. The bond was true. In the days that followed, peace began to settle. The whispers quieted. Many who had doubted began to see the strength in kindness and unity. Tom and Elnai traveled the empire, sharing their story. They showed that courage was not only in battle, but in standing for what was right. Elnai stood beside Tom on a balcony overlooking the capital. The twin suns set behind the mountains. The future was still uncertain, but filled with hope. Tom smiled and said, We still have much to do. But together, we can build something new. Elnai nodded. This is only the beginning of our story. The morning sun rose over the capital of Zephyra, casting a warm light on the marble towers and glittering gardens. The city was alive with excitement and tension. Today was the day of proving, the moment when the bond between Tom and Princess Elnai would be tested before the entire empire. Thousands had gathered in the Great Hall, and many more watched from their homes through floating screens. The day of proving was an ancient tradition rarely used but deeply respected. It was designed to test the true connection between bonded souls through a challenge, called the Dance of Echoes. This trial was not about strength or weapons, but about harmony of mind and spirit. The dancers must move as one, perfectly in sync, showing their unity and trust. Tom stood quietly behind a golden curtain in the preparation room. He felt the weight of many eyes on him, even though no one could see him yet. His heart beat fast but steady. He remembered all the trials he had passed. But this one felt different. It was not just about proving himself. It was about proving that love and unity could cross the boundaries of species and tradition. Elnai stood beside him, dressed in a flowing robe of soft silver. Her eyes met his, calm and full of trust. She reached out and took his hand. "We have come far," she said softly. "No matter what happens today, I'm proud to stand with you." Tom nodded. Together, he said. The curtain opened, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Tom and Elnai stepped into the center of the great hall. The floor beneath them was a smooth, shining surface that reflected their faces and the lights above. The music began a slow, rhythmic beat that filled the room with energy. They started to move. Their steps were careful at first, testing the rhythm and each other's movements. The dance of echoes required more than physical coordination. It demanded deep mental connection and trust. As the music grew stronger, their movements became more fluid and natural. The crowd watched in silence, sensing the growing bond between the two. Tom felt Elnai's presence like a warm light guiding him. He closed his eyes briefly and matched his breathing to hers. Their steps matched perfectly, as if they shared one soul. But the challenge was not yet over. Varn, the noble who had opposed the bond, watched from the shadows. He was not willing to accept defeat so easily. Using his influence, he had arranged for distractions during the dance. Lights flickered suddenly. Loud noises echoed from the halls. Whispers filled the air, trying to break their focus. Tom stumbled once, nearly losing balance. The crowd gasped. He felt a cold wave of doubt rise within him. Was this too much? Could he truly overcome this? Elnai's hand tightened around his. Her voice was calm but strong. "Remember us. Remember why we stand." Tom took a deep breath and opened his eyes. The distractions faded into silence. His mind cleared. He felt the steady beat of Elnai's heart, the trust in her eyes. Together, they moved with renewed grace. The music reached its peak, and their dance became a beautiful flow of light and motion. Every step, every turn was in perfect harmony. The crowd began to cheer softly, then louder as the dance ended. Golden light filled the great hall. The ancient spirits of Zephyra had accepted their bond once again. The test was complete. Varn stepped forward, his face shadowed but respectful. He bowed to Tom and Elnai, acknowledging their strength and truth. The Empress rose from her throne, her voice clear and proud. "Today, we have witnessed not only a bond of tradition but a bond of hearts. Let this union be a symbol of unity and hope for all Zephyra." The crowd erupted into applause. Tom and Elnai stood together, hands joined, smiling with relief and joy. After the ceremony, the city celebrated. Music filled the streets, and people danced under the twin moons. Tom and Elnai walked side by side through the crowds, greeted with respect and warmth. The story of the human and the princess spread quickly, inspiring many. That night, in the quiet of the palace garden, Tom and Elnai sat beneath the stars. "The trials tested us in ways I did not expect," Tom said. Elnai smiled. "They tested not just our strength, but our trust. We have shown that true unity can cross any boundary." Tom looked at her and nodded. "The empire is changing. and we will face new challenges. But together, we are stronger. Elnai took his hand gently. This is only the beginning. The future is ours to build. Above them, the stars shone bright, as if lighting the way for a new era. The first light of dawn spread gently over Zephyr's capital. The city was quiet after the celebrations, but inside the palace, a new energy filled the air. The bond between Tom and Princess Elnai had been tested and accepted by the ancient flame, the trials, and even by the people. But now the real work began. Elnai stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Her small figure was strong against the sky. Tom joined her, carrying the white flower from the dream forest in his hand. The flower still glowed softly, a symbol of their journey and connection. Tomorrow, we will meet the council again, Elnai said. They will ask us to lead, to make decisions that will shape the empire. As future, Tom nodded, his eyes on the city below. It will not be easy. Change is never easy. But we have shown what is possible when people stand together. Their time together had deepened into more than just a bond of tradition. They had learned from each other, understanding to very different worlds and finding common ground. Tom had taught Elnai about patience and diplomacy, while she had shown him the strength and kindness and quiet courage. That evening, the council gathered once more in the great hall. This time, the mood was different. Nobles who had opposed the bond now spoke of respect and hope. The Empress watched closely, knowing her daughter's future depended on this moment. Elnai and Tom entered the hall together. They stood side by side before the council. The lead elders spoke first. Princess Elnai, human envoy Tom, the Empire has seen a great change. Your bond has passed all tests. Now, we must decide how to move forward. Will you lead the Empire together? Elnai spoke clearly. Yes, we will lead with wisdom and heart. We will listen to the people and work for unity and peace. Tom added, we will face challenges, but we will face them together. The strength of Zephyr is in its people, not just in tradition. The council voted. One by one, the nobles stood and pledged their support. Even those who had doubted spoke of hope for a new era. The decision was unanimous. As the sun set, the city celebrated the new leaders. Songs were sung, lights danced in the sky, and the air was filled with joy. But behind the celebration was hard work waiting to begin. In the weeks that followed, Elnai and Tom traveled across the empire. They met leaders from distant planets, listened to the needs of the people, and worked to bring different cultures together. Tom's experience as a human envoy helped open new doors, while Elnai's calm strength inspired those around her. Together, they faced old enemies who did not welcome change. They solved conflicts that had lasted generations. Their bond was tested daily, but each challenge only made it stronger. One night, standing again in the palace garden, Elnai looked at Tom with gratitude. I never thought a human would stand with me, but you showed me that true strength comes from the heart. Tom smiled softly. And you showed me that kindness can be the greatest power of all. Above them, the twin moons shone bright, as if watching over their journey. The empire of Zephyr was changing, but one thing was certain. With unity, courage, and hope, a new dawn was rising. And this was only the beginning. End of story.